A woman stands at this crossroads: sell her soul to survive, or lose everything to stay true to herself. In a harsh mountain town where appearance determines worth, Evelyn Harper, a baker dismissed and judged, is about to sign a contract that will erase everything she is. But a man who has stayed silent for 5 years will break every rule to save her, not with empty promises, but with everything he has. Follow this story to the end, hit like, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this journey goes. The wind came down from the mountains like it had a grudge. It rattled the windows of the bakery on Pine Street, shook the hand-painted sign that read Harper's, and sent dust skittering across the wooden planks of the porch. Inside, Evelyn Harper pulled another tray of sourdough from the oven, her face flushed from the heat, her apron dusted white with flour. She set the loaves on the cooling rack and wiped her hands on a towel that had seen better days. The bread was perfect, golden crust, the kind of rise that came from years of practice, not luck. Her mother had taught her that, taught her to feel the dough, to know when it was ready not by the clock but by touch. That knowledge was all Evelyn had left of her now. The bell above the door jangled. Evelyn looked up to see Martha Finch, the postmaster's wife, stepping inside with that tight smile she always wore when she was about to say something she thought was helpful. "Morning, Evelyn." "Morning, Martha. What can I get you?" "2 of those round loaves, and some of those butter biscuits if you have any left." Evelyn moved to the counter, wrapping the bread in brown paper with efficient hands. "Made a fresh batch this morning." Martha watched her work, her eyes traveling over Evelyn's face, her sturdy frame, the flour smudges on her cheek. "You know, Evelyn, you really ought to think about doing something with yourself." Evelyn's hands paused for just a second. Then she continued wrapping. "Doing what, exactly?" "Well?" Martha glanced toward the window, as if the answer might be written on the glass. "You're a smart woman, talented, but you're not getting any younger, and this town, well, people talk. Let them talk. I'm just saying, if you put a little effort into your appearance, maybe fixed your hair, got yourself a nice dress, there's plenty of men who'd overlook." She caught herself. Who'd see past the surface? Evelyn tied the string around the package with a sharp tug. "That'll be 60 cents. Martha pulled the coins from her purse and set them on the counter. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say more, then thought better of it. "You're a stubborn one, Evelyn Harper. I've heard." The door jangled again as Martha left. Evelyn stood there for a moment, staring at the coins on the counter. She'd heard it all before. The town had opinions about her, about the fact that she was 32 and unmarried, about the way she looked, about the fact that she didn't seem to care. They respected her bread but questioned her worth as a woman. She swept the coins into the cash box and went back to work. The town of Ridgeline sat in a valley between 2 peaks, a place where the land was hard and the people were harder. It had started as a mining camp 20 years back, and some of that rough edge had never worn off. The mines were mostly played out now, leaving behind a collection of storefronts, a church, a saloon, and about 200 people who had nowhere better to go. Evelyn had been born here. Her mother had run the bakery before her, and her grandmother before that. 3 generations of Harper women, all of them alone by the time they died. Evelyn didn't like to think about what that pattern might mean for her. She spent the rest of the morning kneading dough, shaping loaves, keeping the ovens fed. The rhythm of it steadied her. Out here, you learned not to waste time on things you couldn't control. The bread didn't care what you looked like. It only cared that you knew what you were doing. Around noon, she heard boots on the porch. Heavy, unfamiliar. The door opened and a man stepped inside, tall, clean-shaven, wearing a suit that had no business being in a town like Ridgeline. "Good afternoon," he said, removing his hat. His voice was smooth, educated. "You must be Miss Harper." "That's right." He extended a hand. "Victor Hale. I'm with the Western Development Company. I've heard excellent things about your establishment." Evelyn wiped her hands on her apron before shaking. His grip was firm, his palm soft. "What can I do for you, Mr. Hale?" "I'm here on business, actually. Mind if we talk?" She gestured toward one of the small tables by the window. He sat, placing his hat on the chair beside him. Evelyn poured 2 cups of coffee from the pot on the stove and brought them over. "I'll get straight to it," Victor said. "I represent investors who are very interested in Ridgeline. We believe this town has potential: tourism, development, modernization. But for that to happen, we need the right businesses in place. Businesses that reflect a certain Standard. Evelyn sipped her coffee and said nothing. Your bakery has a reputation, Victor continued. People talk about it as far as Silver City. That's valuable. But the building itself, the branding, the presentation, it's all a bit rustic. It's a bakery. It could be more. He leaned forward, his eyes bright with the kind of enthusiasm that came easy to men who'd never had to scrub an oven. We're prepared to make you an offer. We'll buy the property, renovate it, turn it into something that can compete with establishments in Denver or San Francisco. You'd stay on as head baker at a significant salary increase. All we ask is that you work with our consultants to modernize the recipes, streamline production, and present a more polished image. Evelyn set her cup down. You want to change my mother's recipes? We want to refine them, make them accessible to a broader audience. And the polished image part, what does that mean? Victor smiled. It was a kind smile, or at least it was supposed to be. Miss Harper, you're clearly a talented woman, but image matters in business. We'd provide resources, wardrobe consultations, perhaps some guidance on presentation. Nothing drastic, just enhancements. Evelyn felt something cold settle in her chest. You're saying I'm not presentable enough to work in my own bakery. I'm saying there's potential here that isn't being fully realized. He slid a folded paper across the table. This is our initial offer. I think you'll find it more than fair. She didn't touch the paper. I'll need time to think. Of course. Take a week. But I should mention, we're looking at other properties as well. If you decline, we'll move forward with a competitor. Either way, Ridgeline is getting a modern bakery. The question is whether you'll be part of it. He stood, placed his hat back on his head, and tipped it toward her. Thank you for the coffee, Miss Harper. I look forward to hearing from you. When he was gone, Evelyn sat alone at the table, staring at the folded paper. Outside, the wind picked up again, rattling the windows like it was trying to get in. That night, Evelyn sat in the small room above the bakery that served as her living quarters. The ledger was open in front of her, the numbers stark and unforgiving. She'd been running thin for months, flour prices up, fewer customers as the mines closed, repairs to the oven she'd been putting off because she couldn't afford them. Victor's offer sat beside the ledger, still folded. She knew what people would say, that she should take it, that she'd be a fool not to, that beggars couldn't be choosers, and a woman in her position had no right to be proud. But the idea of changing her mother's recipes, of standing in a kitchen that looked like hers but wasn't, wearing clothes picked out by someone else, smiling for customers who cared more about appearance than taste, it made her stomach turn. She closed the ledger and walked to the window. Ridgeline at night was quiet, just a scattering of lights against the dark bulk of the mountains. She'd spent her whole life here. It wasn't much, but it was hers. A movement caught her eye. Across the street, half hidden in the shadow of the livery stable, a figure stood watching. Evelyn froze. The figure didn't move, didn't step into the light. After a moment, she pulled the curtain closed. It wasn't the first time she'd noticed someone watching. Over the past few years, she'd caught glimpses. A man at the edge of the market, a shadow near the tree line when she walked home from church. She'd told herself it was nothing, that she was imagining things. But tonight, with Victor's offer weighing on her mind, the presence felt different, less like a threat and more like a question she didn't know how to answer. By the end of the week, word had spread. Ridgeline was a small town, and news traveled fast, especially when it involved money and change. People had opinions. You'd be set for life, said Thomas Brennan, who ran the general store. A salary like that? You could buy a house, save for your old age. It's a good opportunity, Martha Finch added, her voice dripping with the kind of concern that was really judgment. And Lord knows, Evelyn, you could use the help. A woman alone. It's not right. Even Reverend Michaels weighed in after Sunday service. Pride is a sin, Miss Harper. If the Lord has provided a path forward, it would be wise to take it. Evelyn listened to them all and said nothing. She thanked them for their concern and went back to her work. But at night, alone in her room, she felt the walls closing in. The debt, the pressure, the constant reminder that she wasn't enough. It was exhausting. She'd spent her whole life proving herself, and it still wasn't enough. Maybe Victor was right. Maybe the problem was her. She picked up the offer again, unfolded it, read the terms. The salary was generous. The contract was clear. All she had to do was sign. Her hand trembled as she reached for the pen. Och. The morning of the meeting, Evelyn dressed carefully. Not in anything fancy. She didn't own anything fancy, but in her best skirt and a clean blouse. She braided her hair and pinned it up, then looked at herself in the small mirror above the wash basin. The woman looking back at her was tired. Worn. Not ugly, exactly, but not beautiful either. Just plain. Ordinary. She thought about what Martha had said, what Victor had implied, what the whole town seemed to believe, that she could be more if she just tried harder, that the problem wasn't the world, it was her. She turned away from the mirror and went downstairs. Victor was already waiting at the table, the contract spread out in front of him. He stood when she entered, that polished smile firmly in place. "Miss Harper, I'm glad you decided to come." "I said I'd think about it." "And?" Evelyn sat down across from him. Her hands were shaking, so she folded them in her lap where he couldn't see. "I have some questions." "Of course." "The recipes. How much would you change?" "We'd work together on that, nothing too drastic, just simplifications, cost reductions, things that make sense for scale." "And the presentation, what exactly would that involve?" Victor's smile softened like he was talking to a child. "Evelyn, may I call you Evelyn? You're a talented baker. No one disputes that. But running a business at this level requires a certain polish. We'd bring in a consultant, someone who specializes in branding and image. New wardrobe, maybe some coaching on customer interaction. Think of it as an investment in yourself." "An investment," Evelyn repeated. "Exactly." She looked down at the contract. The words blurred together. All she had to do was sign. All she had to do was become someone else. "I need another minute," she said quietly. "Take your time." She reached for the pen. Her fingers closed around it. This was survival. This was practicality. This was what a smart woman would do. The door slammed open. Evelyn jumped, the pen clattering to the table. Victor turned, annoyance flashing across his face. A man stood in the doorway. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in worn canvas and leather. His hair was dark and unkempt, his face weathered by wind and sun. He looked like he'd walked straight out of the mountains, and maybe he had. "Who the hell are you?" Victor demanded. The man ignored him. His eyes were fixed on Evelyn, gray and intense. "Don't sign it." Evelyn's heart was hammering. She knew that face. She'd seen it at the edges of crowds, in the shadows at dusk. The Watcher. "What are you doing here?" "Stopping you from making a mistake." Victor stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is a private meeting. You need to leave." The man finally looked at him, and there was something in that gaze that made Victor take a step back. "I'm not talking to you." He crossed the room in 3 long strides and dropped something on the table. A leather pouch, heavy and clinking. Coins spilled out, silver and gold, more money than Evelyn had seen in months. "That's $800, the man said. "Enough to cover your debts and then some. Take it. Tell him to go to hell." Evelyn stared at the money, then at the man. "I don't understand. Who are you?" "Caleb Stone." The name meant nothing to her. "Why would you?" "Because you don't need to change a damn thing." His voice was rough, like he wasn't used to using it. "You're perfect the way you are. And if this town can't see that, they're blind." Victor recovered his composure. "This is absurd. Miss Harper, you don't even know this man. He's clearly unhinged." "I know what I'm doing," Caleb said, still looking at Evelyn. "I've been watching you for 5 years. I know you wake up at 4 every morning to start the ovens. I know you give bread to families that can't pay. I know you work yourself to the bone and never complain. I know you're the strongest person in this town, and I know you deserve better than this." He nodded toward Victor. "Better than him." Evelyn couldn't breathe. "You've been watching me?" "Yes." "For 5 years?" "Yes." That's... She didn't know what it was. Terrifying? Romantic? Insane? "Why didn't you ever say anything?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "Because I'm not good with words. Because I didn't think you'd want to hear from someone like me. Because I'm a coward." He pushed the money toward her. "But I'm not coward enough to stand by and watch you sell yourself for a lie." Victor slammed his hand on the table. "Enough of this nonsense. Miss Harper, I need an answer. Are you signing this contract or not?" Evelyn looked at the contract, at the money, at Caleb standing there like a wall between her and the decision she'd been about to make. She picked up the contract. Victor smiled. Evelyn tore it in half. Get out, she said quietly. Victor's smile vanished. Excuse me? I said get out. She stood, her hands steady now. Take your contract, take your consultants, take your polish, and get the hell out of my bakery. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. Victor snatched up the torn pieces of the contract, his face flushed with anger. You'll regret this. We're still opening a bakery in Ridgeline, with or without you. And when we do, you'll be finished. Then I'll be finished on my own terms. He grabbed his hat and stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. The silence that followed was deafening. Evelyn sank back into her chair, her whole body shaking. She looked at Caleb, who was still standing there, watching her with those steady gray eyes. I can't take your money, she said. Why not? Because I don't know you. Because it's too much. Because... She stopped, overwhelmed. Because I don't understand why you do this. Caleb pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the scar along his jaw, the calluses on his hands. He looked like a man who'd lived hard and expected nothing. I'm a trapper, he said. I work the high country, sell pelts in Silver City. I don't come into town much. Don't have much use for people. He paused. But I've been coming here, to your bakery, not inside usually, just nearby. Why? Because you reminded me that there's still good in the world. His voice was quiet, almost embarrassed. I'd watch you through the window, see you working. You never rushed, never cut corners. You treated everyone the same, whether they had money or not. You didn't smile for show or pretend to be something you weren't. You were just real. Evelyn felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. You don't know me. I know enough. I'm not special. I'm just... You're everything that bastard said you weren't. Caleb leaned forward. And I'm not asking for anything. I don't expect you to fall into my arms or thank me or owe me a damn thing. I just couldn't stand there and watch you give up who you are because some fool in a suit told you that you weren't good enough. A tear slipped down Evelyn's cheek. She wiped it away quickly, angry at herself for crying. People are going to talk. Let them. They'll say I'm a charity case, that I can't manage on my own. They've been saying that anyway. She laughed despite herself, a wet, broken sound. You're right about that. Caleb stood. Keep the money. Pay your debts. Fix the oven. Buy new flour. Whatever you need. I don't need it back. Caleb, I mean it. He headed toward the door, then stopped. If you ever need anything, anything at all, I'm up at the old trapper's cabin, North Ridge. You can't miss it. Wait. Evelyn stood, still gripping the edge of the table. Why now? You've been watching for 5 years. Why step in now? He looked back at her, and for the first time she saw something vulnerable in his expression. Because I was afraid if I didn't, I'd lose the chance to know you. And I've already wasted enough time. Then he was gone, the door closing quietly behind him. Evelyn stood alone in the bakery, surrounded by the smell of bread and the weight of a decision that had just changed everything. She looked down at the money on the table, more than she'd ever had at once, given freely by a man who expected nothing in return. Outside, the wind howled down from the mountains, but for the first time in months, Evelyn didn't feel like it was rattling her foundation. She felt like maybe, just maybe, she'd found one instead. The money sat in a tin box under Evelyn's bed for 3 days before she touched it. She'd wake in the middle of the night and know it was there, feel the weight of it like a second heartbeat in the room. $800. More than her mother had ever saved in her entire life. On the 4th morning, she took the box to the bank. Mr. Hensley, the bank manager, counted the coins twice, his eyebrows climbing higher with each stack. That's quite a sum, Miss Harper. Inheritance? A loan, Evelyn said. The lie came easier than she'd expected. From family? From a friend. Hensley made a note in his ledger, his pen scratching across the paper. Well, this clears your outstanding balance with us. Leaves you with just over $400. Shall I open a savings account? No, I'll take it. He looked at her over his spectacles. It's not wise to carry this much cash, Miss Harper. I have expenses. She left the bank with the money in her bag and walked straight to the hardware store. The bell jangled as she entered, and Samuel Wright looked up from behind the counter, surprise crossing his weathered face. Evelyn, don't usually see you in here. I need parts for my oven. The firebox is cracked and the door hinge is shot. Samuel wiped his hands on his apron. I can order them. Take about 2 weeks to come in from Denver. How much? He named a figure that would have been impossible a week ago. Evelyn pulled the bills from her bag without hesitating. Order them, and I need 10 pounds of nails, a new mixing paddle, and that roll of copper sheeting in the window. Samuel's eyes widened. You come into money? I came into cents. How much for all of it? By noon, word had spread. Evelyn Harper had cash and she was spending it. She bought flour from Thomas Brennan's store. Bomb bought 50 pounds of the good stuff, not the cheap grade she'd been using. She paid off her tab at the butcher's and ordered a side of pork for rendering lard. She even stopped at the seamstress and commissioned 2 new aprons, heavy canvas that would last. You win the lottery? Mrs. Chen asked, pinning the fabric around Evelyn's waist. Something like that. People are saying Caleb Stone gave you money. Evelyn held still while Mrs. Chen adjusted the fit. People say a lot of things. They're saying he's sweet on you, that he's been watching you. Mrs. Chen, are you going to make these aprons or gossip all afternoon? The seamstress smiled, but there was something knowing in it. Can't I do both? When Evelyn left, she could feel eyes on her from every doorway, every window. The town was buzzing and she was the cause. Part of her wanted to hide, to wait until the talk died down. But another part, the part that had torn Victor's contract in half, refused to shrink. She walked back to the bakery with her head up. That evening, as she was closing up, Martha Finch appeared in the doorway with 2 other women from the church auxiliary. They had that look people get when they think they're doing you a favor. Evelyn, we need to talk, Martha said. Evelyn didn't stop sweeping. About what? About Caleb Stone. What about him? Martha exchanged glances with the other women. Evelyn, we're concerned. This man, he's been watching you. That's not normal. That's not safe. He gave me money to pay my debts. That's all. That's not all, said Helen Porter, the blacksmith's wife. Men don't give women that kind of money without expecting something in return. Evelyn stopped sweeping. You don't know him. Neither do you, Martha said. That's the point. He's a stranger, a hermit. He lives up in the mountains like some kind of wild animal, and now suddenly he's fixated on you? Evelyn, that's not romantic. That's dangerous. He's never done anything to hurt me. Yet, Helen said. But what happens when you don't give him what he wants? What happens when you reject him? The words hit harder than Evelyn wanted to admit. She'd thought the same thing, late at night when she couldn't sleep. She didn't know Caleb Stone. Didn't know what he really wanted, what he might expect. The watching could be protective, or it could be possessive. There was no way to tell until it was too late. I appreciate your concern, Evelyn said carefully, but I can handle myself. Can you? Martha's voice softened. Evelyn, we know you're proud. We know you like to do things on your own, but this is different. This man could be dangerous. Or he could just be kind. Kindness doesn't come for free. After they left, Evelyn locked the door and stood in the empty bakery, listening to the silence. She thought about Caleb's face when he dropped the money on the table, the way his voice had cracked when he said she was perfect the way she was. She thought about 5 years of watching, 5 years of silence. 5 years. That wasn't normal. Martha was right about that much. But then again, nothing about her life was normal, and maybe that was exactly the point. The next morning, Evelyn made a decision. She packed a basket with fresh bread, some butter, and a jar of preserves. She put on her coat and her walking boots. Then she headed north toward the ridge. The trail was steep and rocky, winding through pine trees that grew so thick they blocked out most of the sunlight. Evelyn had never been this far up the mountain. Few people had. The high country was Caleb's territory, and he'd made it clear over the years that he preferred it that way. It took her 2 hours to find the cabin. It sat in a small clearing backed up against a cliff face that protected it from the worst of the wind. The structure was rough but solid. Logs chinked with moss and mud, a stone chimney, shutters that looked like they'd been carved by hand. Smoke rose from the chimney in a thin gray line. Evelyn stood at the edge of the clearing, suddenly uncertain. What was she doing here? What was she going to say? The door opened before she could decide. Caleb stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. He was dressed in the same worn canvas and leather, his hair tied back with a strip of rawhide. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "I brought you bread," Evelyn said finally, holding up the basket. Caleb's eyes flicked to the basket, then back to her face. "You didn't have to do that." "I know, I wanted to." He stepped aside. "Come in." The cabin's interior was sparse but clean. A stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table, a narrow bed covered with furs. Shelves lined one wall, holding traps and tools and a few battered books. The air smelled of wood smoke and leather and something sharp that might have been cedar. Evelyn set the basket on the table. "It's not much, just a thank you." "For what?" "For the money, for what you said." Caleb poured water from a pitcher into 2 tin cups. His movements were deliberate, careful. "You didn't have to come all the way up here to thank me. I wanted to see where you lived. I wanted to—" She stopped, unsure how to put it into words. "I wanted to know if you were real." He handed her a cup, his calloused fingers brushing hers. "I'm real. People are talking. They're saying things about you, about us. Let them talk. They're saying you're dangerous, that I should stay away from you." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Maybe they're right." "Are they?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Evelyn saw something raw in his expression. "I don't know. I've spent the last 5 years watching you from a distance because I didn't trust myself to get closer. I'm not good with people, Evelyn. I'm not good with words or feelings or any of the things that normal men are supposed to be good at. I'm better with silence and solitude. Safer that way." "Safer for who?" "For everyone." He set his cup down. "My father was a mean drunk. My mother left when I was 8. I grew up learning that people hurt each other, that getting close just means getting hurt. So I stayed away. Came up here where I couldn't do damage." Evelyn felt something loosen in her chest. "And then you saw me. And then I saw you." His voice dropped. "And I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe there was one person in the world who could make me believe in something better. That's a lot of weight to put on a stranger." "I know." He looked away. "That's why I stayed back. That's why I never said anything. I knew it wasn't fair to you, wasn't fair to expect you to be what I needed you to be. But then I saw you sitting at that table with that bastard, saw you about to sign away everything you were, and I couldn't—" He stopped, his hands clenching into fists. "I couldn't just watch anymore." Evelyn set her own cup down. "The women in town think you're going to hurt me. I won't. They think you'll expect something from me, payment for the money. I don't." He turned back to her. "Evelyn, I don't expect a damn thing from you. If you want to pay me back, fine. If you don't, that's fine too. If you never want to see me again, I'll go back to keeping my distance. But I need you to know, I'm not your enemy. I'm not trying to control you or change you or make you into something you're not. I just wanted you to have a choice." She believed him. It was probably foolish, probably dangerous, but she believed him. She could see it in his eyes, in the way he held himself like he was ready for her to walk away at any moment. "I have a question," she said. "Ask it." "What do you want from me?" "Really?" Caleb was quiet for a long time. Outside, a bird called from somewhere in the pines. Finally, he said, "I want to know you. Not from a distance, not through a window. I want to sit across a table from you and hear you talk. I want to know what makes you laugh, what keeps you up at night, what you dream about when you let yourself dream. I want—" He stopped, his voice rough. "I want a chance, that's all." Evelyn's heart was hammering. A chance at what? At something real. She thought about Martha's warnings, about Helen's concern, about all the very sensible reasons she should walk out of this cabin and never come back. Then she thought about the way Caleb had looked at her in the bakery, the way he'd stood between her and a decision that would have destroyed her, the way he was looking at her now, like she was worth fighting for. "Okay," she said, his eyes widened. "Okay, one chance. But you have to come down off this mountain. You have to let me know you too, not just the version of yourself you've decided is safe." "I don't know if I can do that." "Try." Caleb exhaled, something like relief crossing his face. "All right, I'll try." They ate bread at the table while the fire crackled in the hearth. Caleb talked haltingly at first, then with more ease, about his life in the mountains, about the rhythms of trapping and the silence of winter. Evelyn told him about the bakery, about her mother's recipes, about the weight of carrying on alone. When the sun started to sink toward the horizon, Caleb walked her back down the trail. They didn't hold hands or touch, just walked side by side with the mountain air cold and clear around them. At the edge of town, Caleb stopped. "I'll come by tomorrow, if that's all right." "It's all right." "And Evelyn?" He looked uncomfortable, like the words were costing him. "Thank you for giving me a chance." She smiled. "Thank you for asking." That night, lying in bed above the bakery, Evelyn felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not happiness, exactly. Not contentment. Something lighter and more fragile than either. Hope, maybe. Or possibility. The next morning, Victor Hale made good on his threat. Evelyn was pulling loaves from the oven when she heard the commotion outside. Voices raised, the sound of hammering, wagon wheels on the street. She wiped her hands and went to the window. Across the street, where the old Morrison place had stood empty for 2 years, men were unloading lumber and equipment. A sign was already going up, fresh paint gleaming in the morning sun. Ridgeline Quality Bakery. Opening soon. Evelyn's stomach dropped. She stepped outside. A crowd had gathered to watch the construction. Thomas Brennan stood at the front, his arms crossed. "Heard they brought in bakers from Denver," he said when Evelyn approached. "Professional operation, modern ovens, fancy packaging. Word is they're going to undercut prices by half for the first month." "Half?" Evelyn stared at the building. "That's not sustainable." "Don't have to be. Just has to drive you out of business. Then they'll raise prices once you're gone." Martha Finch appeared at Evelyn's elbow. "I told you this would happen. Victor Hale doesn't make idle threats." "No," Evelyn said quietly. "I suppose he doesn't." She went back inside and stood in her bakery, her mother's bakery, her grandmother's bakery, and tried not to panic. The repairs she'd ordered wouldn't be finished for another week. Her inventory was still low, and now she'd be competing against a business designed specifically to destroy her. The bell jangled. Evelyn turned to find Caleb in the doorway, his hat in his hands. "I saw," he said. "News travels fast." "What are you going to do?" Evelyn looked around the bakery, at the worn floorboards, the old oven, the shelves her grandfather had built by hand. "I don't know. Fight, I guess. What else can I do?" Caleb stepped closer. "You can't win a price war. Not against that kind of money." "I know. So you have to win a different kind of war." She looked at him. "What do you mean?" "They're selling bread. You're selling something else. Something they can't replicate." He gestured around the room. "History, connection, soul. Your customers don't just come here for food. They come here because this place means something." "Not enough of them," Evelyn said bitterly. "Half the town will switch to the new bakery the moment prices drop. You heard Thomas. People are already talking about it like it's a done deal." "Then you remind them why you matter." "How?" Caleb was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he said, "When's the last time you told someone the story behind your recipes? When's the last time you let people see why this place is different?" Evelyn frowned. "I'm a baker, not a storyteller." "Everyone's a storyteller. You just have to decide what story you want to tell." Over the next week, the new bakery took shape across the street. Workers hammered and sawed from dawn to dusk. The smell of fresh paint drifted through the air. A second sign went up, this one advertising opening specials. Bread, 5 cents a loaf. First 50 customers get a free sample box. Evelyn's regular customers started asking questions. "Is it true they're using machines to knead the dough?" asked Mrs. Henderson, the school teacher. "I heard they're bringing in exotic flavors," said Jacob Mills, who ran the livery. "Cinnamon rolls, cream pastries, things we can't get anywhere else." Even Reverend Michaels stopped by, his expression apologetic. "Evelyn, I want you to know I'll still patronize your establishment, but my housekeeper has been asking about the new place, and with my budget being what it is, "I understand," Evelyn said, even though she didn't, even though it felt like betrayal. The repairs to her oven finished just as the new bakery announced its opening day. Evelyn stood in front of the rebuilt firebox, running her hand over the smooth new bricks. Samuel Wright had done good work. The oven heated faster now, held temperature better. It was the best it had been in years. It might not matter. Caleb came by every evening after she closed. They'd sit at the table by the window and talk while the light faded outside. He never pushed, never demanded more than she was willing to give, just showed up, steady and quiet, like a promise. "Tell me about your mother," he said one night. Evelyn was kneading dough for the next morning's batch. Her hands moved automatically, muscle memory guiding the rhythm. "What do you want to know?" Why did she love this? Evelyn paused, considering. She said baking was the one thing she could control. You can't control the weather or the mines or whether your husband comes home at night, but you can control how long you knead the dough. You can control the temperature of the oven. You can take flour and water and salt and turn them into something that feeds people. That mattered to her. And to you? To me too. Evelyn shaped the dough into a ball and set it in the proving basket. My mother died when I was 19. Influenza. She went from healthy to gone in 3 days. After the funeral, I didn't know what to do with myself. The bakery was just sitting there, empty. I could have sold it, could have moved to Denver or San Francisco like some people do, but I kept thinking about what she'd said, about control, about making something that matters. So you stayed. So I stayed. She covered the dough with a cloth. And now some stranger in a suit is trying to take it away from me because I'm not pretty enough to be the face of his business. You're beautiful. Evelyn laughed, but there was no humor in it. You don't have to say that. I'm not saying it because I have to. I'm saying it because it's true. Caleb stood and crossed to where she was working. You're beautiful when you're kneading dough, when you're pulling bread from the oven, when you're telling some busybody to mind their own business, when you're standing up to men who think they can buy you. That's beauty, Evelyn. Not whatever the hell Victor Hale was trying to sell you. She looked up at him, this strange man who'd come out of nowhere and upended everything. Why do you see me that way? Because I'm paying attention. The night before the new bakery opened, Evelyn barely slept. She lay in bed listening to the sounds of last-minute preparations across the street, voices calling instructions, hammers pounding stakes into the ground for the opening day banner. They were ready. They were confident. They were everything she wasn't. At 3 a.m, she gave up on sleep and went downstairs. The bakery was dark and cold. She lit the lamps and stoked the oven, then stood in the middle of the room trying to figure out what to do. Caleb's words echoed in her head. They're selling bread. You're selling something else. But what? What did she have that they didn't? She thought about her mother, about the stories embedded in every recipe. The sourdough starter that had been kept alive for 3 generations. The rye bread her grandmother used to make for Christmas. The butter biscuits that were her father's favorite before he died in the mine collapse. Every loaf had a story. Every recipe was a memory. Evelyn went to the shelf where she kept her mother's old recipe book. She pulled it down and opened it, the pages brittle and stained with decades of use. There, in her grandmother's handwriting, in her mother's, in her own, were notes and adjustments and little comments. Add more salt. Tastes better with buttermilk. Made this for Emma's wedding. These weren't just recipes. They were a history. She carried the book to the table and started writing. Not recipes this time. Stories. The story of the sourdough starter, smuggled from Germany in her great-grandmother's trunk. The story of the harvest bread, made every September when the wheat came in. The story of the funeral biscuits, baked for every family that lost someone. Because grief was easier to bear with something warm in your hands. By dawn, she had pages of stories. She looked at them spread across the table and felt something click into place. When Caleb arrived an hour later, Evelyn was standing at the counter with flour on her hands and determination in her eyes. I need your help, she said. With what? Telling a story. The new bakery opened at 10 o'clock to a crowd of at least 50 people. Evelyn watched from her window as Victor Hale himself cut the ribbon, his smile wide and practiced. The doors opened and people flooded in, drawn by the promise of cheap bread and free samples. Evelyn's bakery was empty. She stood behind her counter with fresh loaves cooling on the racks and no one to sell them to. The silence was crushing. Then the door opened. Caleb stepped inside, followed by Samuel Wright, then Mrs. Chen, then Jacob Mills and his wife, then a dozen others. People Evelyn knew, people who'd been her customers for years. What are you doing? Evelyn asked. What does it look like? Samuel said. We're buying bread. But the other place must see. Can sell to tourists, Mrs. Chen finished. We're not tourists. Jacob Mills stepped up to the counter. I'll take 2 loaves of that dark rye, the kind your grandmother made. And I want a dozen of those butter biscuits, his wife added. The ones you make with real butter, not whatever oil they're using over there. One by one, they placed their orders. Not because the bread was cheaper, not because it was convenient, because it was theirs. Evelyn's hands shook as she wrapped the loaves, as she took their money, as she realized that maybe, just maybe, Caleb had been right. She wasn't selling bread. She was selling belonging. When the last customer left, Evelyn sank into a chair, overwhelmed. Caleb sat down across from her. That was your doing, she said. No, that was yours. I just reminded people what they already knew. What now? Now you keep going. You tell more stories. You remind people every day why you matter. He reached across the table and took her hand. And you let me help you. Evelyn looked at their joined hands, his rough and scarred, hers dusted with flour. It wasn't perfect. Nothing about this was perfect. She was still in debt, still competing against an operation designed to destroy her, still facing a town that judged her worth by her appearance. But for the first time in her life, she wasn't facing it alone. Okay, she said, let's fight. The fight started small, the way most wars do. Evelyn began writing the stories by hand on small cards, one for each type of bread. She placed them next to the loaves in the display case, simple descriptions of where the recipes came from and why they mattered. The sourdough starter, kept alive since 1868. The rye bread her grandmother baked every winter solstice. The honey oat loaves her mother invented during the hard years when wheat was scarce. People read them. Some smiled. Some nodded like they were remembering something they'd forgotten. A few even asked questions. Is this really the same starter your great-grandmother brought over? Mrs. Henderson asked, holding the card up to the light like it might reveal some hidden truth. Same one. My mother fed it every day of her life. Now I do. That's remarkable. It's just bread, Evelyn said, but she knew it wasn't, not anymore. Across the street, the Ridgeline Quality Bakery was doing brisk business. Their prices stayed low, their shelves stayed full, and their operation ran with mechanical efficiency. They had 3 bakers working in shifts, a delivery wagon that made rounds to the mining camps, and display windows that gleamed with polished glass and gilt lettering. Evelyn had 1 oven, 1 pair of hands, and stories written on scraps of paper. It should have been hopeless. But something strange was happening. The people who came to the new bakery bought their bread and left. The people who came to Evelyn stayed. They lingered at the counter, asking about the recipes, sharing their own memories of her mother's baking. They started bringing their children, pointing to the recipe cards and saying, "Your grandmother used to buy this bread every Sunday." Connection, Evelyn realized, took time. And time was something the new bakery couldn't buy. Caleb came down from the mountain every morning now. He'd arrive before dawn, when the streets were still dark and the only light came from Evelyn's windows. She'd let him in, and he'd sit at the table watching her work in comfortable silence. "You don't have to keep coming," she said one morning, shaping baguettes with practiced efficiency. "I know. Don't you have traps to check? Checked them yesterday. Set new lines up north." He poured himself coffee from the pot she kept on the stove. "Besides, I like watching you work." Evelyn felt heat rise to her face that had nothing to do with the oven. "That's still strange, you know, the watching thing." "Want me to stop?" She thought about it, really thought about it. A month ago, the answer would have been yes, without hesitation. Now, with him sitting there solid and steady while the rest of the world tried to knock her down, the answer was different. "No," she admitted. "I don't." Caleb's expression softened. "Good. Because I wasn't going to." They fell into a rhythm. Evelyn baked, Caleb helped where he could, carrying flour sacks, stoking the oven, cleaning the heavy mixing bowls. He wasn't graceful about it. He moved like a man more used to skinning deer than handling delicate pastry. But he was thorough, and he never complained. Around mid-morning, Caleb would leave to run his own errands, returning in the afternoon with game from his traps. He started bringing Evelyn venison, rabbit, sometimes a brace of pheasants. She'd cook them for dinner, and they'd eat together in the room above the bakery, talking until the lamps burned low. "Tell me something you've never told anyone," Caleb said one evening, pushing his empty plate aside. Evelyn took a sip of water, considering. I used to hate baking. His eyebrows rose. You're joking. I'm not. When I was younger, I'd watch my mother spend every waking hour in that kitchen, and I'd think, I'm never doing that. I'm going to leave this town and do something else, something that matters. What changed? She got sick. Evelyn's throat tightened at the memory. 3 days. That's all it took. And suddenly the bakery was mine, and I realized I didn't actually know how to do anything else. I'd spent so much time resenting it that I never appreciated what she was teaching me. You think she knew? That you resented it? Probably. My mother wasn't stupid. Evelyn traced the rim of her glass with one finger. But she never said anything. Just kept showing me, kept teaching me, like she knew that one day I'd need it whether I wanted to or not. Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then he said, my father used to beat me with his belt when I didn't set the traps right. Said I was useless, that I'd never amount to anything. When I was 16, I waited until he passed out drunk, and I took his rifle and everything I could carry, walked into the mountains and never looked back. Did you ever see him again? Once, about 5 years ago. Ran into him in Silver City. He was old by then, broken down. Didn't even recognize me. Caleb's jaw tightened. I wanted to feel something, anger, satisfaction, anything, but I just felt empty, like I'd spent all those years running from a man who'd already destroyed himself. Evelyn reached across the table and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, rough and warm. We're a pair, aren't we? She said softly. Both running from things that made us who we are. Maybe we're done running. She squeezed his hand. Maybe we are. The next morning, Victor Hale came into Evelyn's bakery for the first time since she'd torn up his contract. He was alone, his suit as immaculate as ever, his smile carefully neutral. Miss Harper, you're still here. Evelyn was arranging loaves in the display case. She didn't look up. Where else would I be? I thought perhaps you'd reconsider my offer, seeing as business must be challenging. Business is fine. Is it? Victor glanced around the empty bakery. Because from what I hear, your customers are few and far between. Meanwhile, across the street, we can barely keep up with demand. Evelyn straightened, meeting his eyes. You didn't come here to gloat, Mr. Hale. What do you want? To make you a new offer. A better one. He pulled a folded paper from his jacket. My investors are impressed with your tenacity. They think you have potential, even if your current operation is limited. So here's the deal. Sell me your recipes, the original ones with the stories attached, and we'll pay you $2,500. Cash. You can close up shop, move somewhere with better opportunities, start fresh. You want to buy my family's recipes. I want to preserve them. Your way of doing things is dying, Miss Harper. In 10 years, nobody will remember hand-kneaded bread or sourdough starters kept alive for generations. But if you let us take those recipes, modernize them, distribute them properly, they'll live on. Isn't that what you want? For your family's legacy to matter? Evelyn felt something cold and sharp in her chest. He was smooth, she'd give him that. He'd found the one argument that might actually work. The idea that she was being selfish by holding on, that sharing was the noble choice. No, she said. Victor's smile faltered. No? Those recipes aren't for sale. Not for $2,500. Not for $10,000. They're mine, and they're staying mine. You're being unreasonable. I'm being myself. That's what you can't stand, isn't it? That I won't become what you want me to be. Victor's expression hardened. You're going to lose everything. Maybe, but it'll be my choice to lose it. He stared at her for a long moment, then shook his head. You're a fool, Miss Harper, a stubborn, foolish woman who doesn't know what's good for her. Probably, but I'm not your fool. She pointed to the door. Get out of my bakery. After he left, Evelyn's hands were shaking so hard she had to sit down. The number kept echoing in her head. $2,500. More than she'd make in 3 years. Enough to start over somewhere nobody knew her, somewhere she wouldn't have to fight every single day just to exist. The door opened. Evelyn looked up, expecting to see Victor returning with another angle of attack. It was Caleb. He took one look at her face and crossed the room in 3 strides. What happened? She told him. All of it. The offer, the arguments, the way Victor had made it sound reasonable and smart, and like she was the crazy one for refusing. Caleb listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said, Do you want the money? Part of me does, the part that's tired of fighting. And the rest of you? Evelyn looked around the bakery, at her mother's old mixing bowls, at the oven her grandfather had helped install, at the counter worn smooth by 3 generations of Harper hands. The rest of me knows that if I sell those recipes, I might as well sell my soul. They'll turn them into something unrecognizable, slap my family's name on it, and I'll have to live knowing I was the one who let it happen. Then you already know what you're going to do. I know what I want to do. I don't know if I can survive it. Caleb pulled a chair close and sat down facing her. Listen to me. You're going to survive this. You know why? Because you're meaner than Victor Hale and tougher than anyone in this town gives you credit for. And because you're not alone anymore. Caleb, I'm not done. His gray eyes were fierce. I've got money saved. Not as much as Victor's offering, but enough. We can pool our resources. I can hunt. You can bake. We'll sell meat pies, game sausages, things the new bakery can't make because they don't have access to what I can provide. We'll make this place into something they can't replicate. That's not your fight. The hell it isn't. You think I came down off that mountain just to watch you struggle alone? He leaned forward. I'm in this, Evelyn. All the way in. If you'll have me. Evelyn felt tears prickling her eyes. She blinked them back, angry at herself for crying. Why? Why do you even care this much? Because you're the first person who ever made me want to be part of the world again. Because when I'm with you, I don't feel like a broken piece of trash hiding in the mountains. I feel like maybe I could be someone worth knowing. His voice dropped. Because I'm falling in love with you, and I don't know how to stop. Don't want to stop. The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest and terrifying. Evelyn opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. You can't just say things like that. Why not? It's true. Because I don't know how to... I'm not good at... She stopped, frustrated. Nobody's ever said that to me before. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with it. You don't have to do anything. Just know it's true. Caleb stood. I'll be here tomorrow morning. We'll start working on the new recipes, but right now, I think you need some time alone. He was halfway to the door when Evelyn found her voice. Caleb, he turned. I'm falling too, she said quietly. I don't know what that means or where it goes, but I'm falling, just so you know. His expression transformed, relief and joy and something almost like wonder crossing his weathered features. He nodded once, then left. Evelyn sat in the silence of the bakery and tried to process what had just happened. She was in love. She was broke. She was facing down an enemy with unlimited resources. And somehow, despite all of that, she felt more alive than she had in years. The next week was brutal. The Ridgeline Quality Bakery launched an aggressive campaign, offering buy 2, get 1 free deals and extending their delivery service to every mining camp within 20 miles. They put up posters advertising their modern methods, their consistent quality, their affordable prices. Evelyn's sales dropped by half. She and Caleb worked from before dawn until after dark, developing new products. Venison hand pies with herbs from the mountains, rabbit stew and flaky pastry, smoked pheasant sausage rolls that sold out within hours of coming out of the oven. The town was divided. Some people, the ones who'd always looked down on Evelyn, gleefully predicted her failure. Others, the ones who remembered her mother, who valued tradition over convenience, became fiercer in their loyalty. Martha Finch, surprisingly, fell into the latter category. I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, she said one afternoon, buying a dozen meat pies for a church social. But I'll be damned if I let some outsider run you out of business. Your mother was a good woman, and this bakery means something. Thank you, Martha. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when we win. She leaned in, lowering her voice. And between you and me, their bread tastes like sawdust. Pretty packaging doesn't make up for no soul. But soul didn't pay the bills. By the end of the month, Evelyn was behind on rent again. The bank sent a notice. She had 2 weeks to make a payment or they'd start foreclosure proceedings. She sat in her room that night, staring at the notice. Caleb was downstairs cleaning up after the day's work. She could hear him moving around, the familiar sounds of bowls being washed and floors being swept. She should go down there, should tell him about the notice, should probably cry or rage or do something. Instead, she just sat there, numb. The door creaked open. Caleb stood in the doorway, his hair damp from washing up. You coming down for dinner? Not hungry. He crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed. "What's wrong?" She handed him the notice without speaking. Caleb read it, his expression darkening. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. How much do you need? More than I have. He was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he said, I have a stake up north, prime beaver territory. I've been saving it for the right season. If I work it hard for 10 days, I can bring in enough pelts to cover this. Caleb, no, it's too dangerous this time of year. The snows, I've trapped in worse. You could get stuck up there. You could freeze to death. Or I could save your bakery. He took her hand. Evelyn, this is happening. One way or another, I'm getting you that money. And if something happens to you, if you don't come back, his jaw tightened. I'll come back. You can't promise that. Yes. Watch me. He stood, his decision made. I'm leaving at first light. I'll be back in 10 days with enough money to clear this debt and buy you some breathing room. Evelyn grabbed his arm. Don't do this, please. I can't. If I lost you because of this place, I'd never forgive myself. Caleb knelt in front of her, his hands on her knees. You're not going to lose me. I'm tougher than I look and meaner than a cornered badger. I've survived 15 winters in those mountains. I can survive 10 more days. Caleb, I'm doing this, he said firmly. Not because you asked, not because I think you can't handle it yourself, but because I love you. And when you love someone, you fight for them, even when they tell you not to. Evelyn cupped his face in her hands. His beard was rough under her palms, his skin warm. If you die up there, I'm going to be so angry at you. Fair enough? She kissed him then, hard and desperate. He responded immediately, his arms coming around her, pulling her close. It wasn't gentle or romantic or any of the things she'd imagined her first real kiss might be. It was fierce and frightened and full of all the things neither of them knew how to say. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. I'll come back, he whispered. You better. He left before dawn, his pack loaded with traps and supplies. Evelyn stood on the porch and watched him disappear into the darkness, heading north toward the high country. Then she went inside and got to work. If Caleb was going to risk his life for her bakery, she sure as hell wasn't going to let it fail. Over the next 9 days, Evelyn worked harder than she ever had in her life. She was in the kitchen by 3 in the morning and didn't stop until midnight. She baked everything she could think of. Breads, pies, pastries, things she hadn't made in years. She wrote more story cards, detailed accounts of every recipe's origin. She put them in the windows, on the counter, handed them out to anyone who'd take them. She started talking to her customers, really talking, asking about their memories, their families, the things that mattered to them. And she listened. Old Mr. Chen told her about coming to America 40 years ago, how the smell of baking bread had reminded him of home. Sarah Mills confessed that she'd learned to bake from Evelyn's grandmother, that those lessons had saved her during the hard years when her husband was injured in the mines. Reverend Michaels admitted that the reason he kept coming back wasn't the bread at all. It was the sense of continuity, of being part of something that outlasted any single generation. Every story Evelyn heard, she wrote down, not just for the bakery, for herself, to remember why this mattered. On the 8th day, Victor Hale came back. Miss Harper, still fighting, I see. Evelyn was too tired to be polite. What do you want, Victor? To give you one last chance. My investors are losing patience. They're prepared to drop prices even further if necessary. They'll operate at a loss for 6 months, a year, however long it takes. Can you outlast that? Guess we'll find out. Where's your mountain man? I notice he hasn't been around. Evelyn's hand stilled on the dough she was shaping. That's none of your business. Word is he went up into the high country. Dangerous this time of year. People die up there. Victor's tone was casual, almost sympathetic. Be a shame if something happened to him. Leave you all alone again. Evelyn looked up, and whatever Victor saw in her expression made him take a step back. Get out, she said, her voice deadly quiet. I'm just saying, get out of my bakery before I throw you out myself. Victor left, but his words stayed behind like poison. People die up there. It had been 8 days. Caleb said 10, but what if he'd been wrong? What if something had happened? Evelyn tried to push the thoughts away, tried to focus on work. But that night, alone in her room, the fear came crashing in. She'd let him go. She'd let him risk everything for her, and if he didn't come back, it would be her fault. The 9th day passed in a haze of anxiety and exhaustion. Every time the door opened, Evelyn's heart jumped, hoping to see Caleb's familiar silhouette. He never appeared. On the 10th morning, Evelyn woke to the sound of knocking. She stumbled downstairs, her heart in her throat, and threw open the door. Caleb stood on the porch, covered in snow and mud, his beard frosted white, his pack bulging with pelts. He looked half dead and wholly triumphant. "Told you I'd come back," he said. Evelyn launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck. He caught her, staggering slightly, his cold hands finding her waist. "You're an idiot," she said into his shoulder. "I know. You could have died. But I didn't." She pulled back to look at him. His lips were chapped, his cheeks raw from windburn, his eyes exhausted. He was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. "How much?" she asked. "Enough. More than enough." He hefted the pack. "Good season. Hit 3 beaver dams and a marten run. Should clear your debt and leave you with 200 extra." Evelyn felt tears streaming down her face. "You're insane." "Probably." He cupped her face in his frozen hands. "But I'm your kind of insane." She kissed him then, there on the porch in the early morning light, not caring who saw or what they'd say. When they broke apart, Caleb was smiling, a real smile, open and unguarded. "Come inside," Evelyn said. "You're freezing." "In a minute." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "Made you something, up there in the cabin at night when I couldn't sleep." Evelyn unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a carving, a small wooden plaque with her name and the bakery's name carved in careful, precise letters. Below it, a date, 1868. The year her great-grandmother had started the business. "Thought you could hang it over the door," Caleb said. "Let people know this place has history, that it matters." Evelyn looked at the carving, at the hours of work it represented, at this rough mountain man who'd somehow seen exactly what she needed. "I love you," she said. Caleb's eyes widened. I love you. I should have said it before you left, but I was scared. I'm not scared anymore." He kissed her again, gentler this time, like she was something precious. "I love you too," he murmured against her lips. "Now can we please go inside before I lose a toe to frostbite?" They went inside together, and for the first time since Victor Hale had walked into her life, Evelyn felt something like peace. The debt was paid the next day. Caleb sold the pelts in Silver City and came back with cash, more than they needed. Evelyn made her payment to the bank, then used the extra money to buy supplies for a month. The Ridgeline Quality Bakery was still there, still operating, still pulling customers. But Evelyn didn't care as much anymore. She'd found something more important than winning. She'd found a reason to keep fighting that had nothing to do with pride or revenge or proving anyone wrong. She was fighting for a life. Her life. The one she was building with Caleb, brick by brick, loaf by loaf, day by day. And that, she was beginning to realize, was worth more than any victory. Winter hit the mountains hard that year. Snow came early and stayed late, piling up in drifts that buried fences and made the streets of Ridgeline treacherous. The cold drove people indoors, made them huddle close to their stoves, made them think twice about unnecessary trips across town. Business slowed for both bakeries. Evelyn watched through her frosted windows as the Ridgeline Quality Bakery struggled with the weather. Their delivery wagon got stuck twice in the first week of December. Their modern ovens, designed for efficiency rather than endurance, broke down when the temperature dropped below zero. They had to close for 3 days while parts were shipped in from Denver. Evelyn's old oven, built to withstand frontier winters, kept burning steady. "They're hurting," Caleb observed one morning, nodding toward the building across the street. He'd moved into the room above the bakery 2 weeks earlier, a quiet transition that the town had accepted with surprising grace. Or maybe they were just too cold to care about gossip. "Good," Evelyn said, then immediately felt guilty. "That's terrible of me, isn't it?" "It's honest." Caleb poured coffee for both of them. "They came here to destroy you. You're allowed to be glad it's not working." "It's not that simple, though. Those bakers, the ones actually doing the work, they're just trying to make a living, same as me. The bakers didn't design this war. Victor Hale did." Evelyn pulled a tray of rolls from the oven, the heat a welcome blast against the cold morning air. "Have you noticed he hasn't been around lately?" He's in Denver, Samuel told me. Apparently the investors are getting nervous about the losses. How nervous? Nervous enough that they're considering pulling out entirely. Evelyn set the tray down carefully. They just abandoned the bakery? It's business. If it's not profitable, they cut their losses and move on. Caleb leaned against the counter. Question is, what happens to the building if they leave? To the bakers they hired? Evelyn hadn't thought about that. She'd been so focused on survival that she hadn't considered what victory might actually look like. The building across the street would sit empty, probably. The bakers would have to find work elsewhere, and she'd be left standing alone again, the last bakery in a dying town. The thought didn't feel as good as she'd expected. I don't want them to suffer, she said quietly. I just wanted them to leave me alone. Sometimes those are the same thing. Before Evelyn could respond, the door opened and Martha Finch rushed in, her shawl covered in snow. Evelyn, thank heaven you're open. I need 3 loaves and whatever pastries you have. The Reverend's wife is sick and half the congregation is bringing food. What's wrong with her? Same thing that's going around. Fever, chills, can't keep anything down. Martha pulled coins from her purse. Doctor says it's influenza. Already took 2 children in the mining camps. Evelyn felt her stomach drop. Influenza. The same thing that had killed her mother. How bad is it? Bad enough. Doc's overwhelmed. They're setting up a sick ward in the church basement. Martha took the wrapped bread, her expression grim. This winter's going to be hard, Evelyn. Real hard. After she left, Evelyn stood frozen at the counter. Caleb touched her shoulder gently. You all right? My mother died in 3 days. 3 days from healthy to gone. Her voice came out flat. I can't. If that happens again, it won't. You don't know that. No. But I know you're stronger than you were at 19, and you're not alone this time. He turned her to face him. Whatever comes, we'll handle it together. The epidemic spread fast. By the end of the week, 20 people were sick. By the end of the month, 50. The doctor stopped taking new patients because he couldn't keep up. The church basement filled beyond capacity. People started caring for the sick at home, which only spread it faster. Evelyn and Caleb stayed healthy, maybe because they'd both survived similar sicknesses before, maybe just because they were lucky. They kept the bakery running, but Evelyn started doing something else too. She began making soup. Big pots of it, thick with vegetables and whatever meat Caleb could provide. She'd ladle it into jars and Caleb would deliver them to the sick families, leaving them on porches to avoid spreading infection. They didn't charge, didn't ask for payment, just left the food and moved on to the next house. We can't afford this, Evelyn said one night, looking at their dwindling supplies. We can't afford not to, Caleb replied. He was right. This was what her mother would have done, what her grandmother had done during the diphtheria outbreak of 1881. The bakery had always been more than just a business. It was part of the town's skeleton, holding things together when everything else fell apart. The Ridgeline Quality Bakery, meanwhile, closed its doors. Not permanently, the sign said, just temporarily until the epidemic passed and business improved. But everyone knew what it really meant. The investors had pulled out. Victor Hale had gone back to Denver. The modern ovens sat cold and dark behind locked doors. Evelyn should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt tired. One frozen January morning, there was a knock on the bakery door before dawn. Evelyn opened it to find one of the bakers from the Quality Bakery standing there. A woman named Claire with flour-dusted hair and worried eyes. I'm sorry to bother you so early, Claire said, but I didn't know where else to go. Come in, you're freezing. Claire stepped inside, rubbing her hands together. I worked at the Quality Bakery, me and 2 others. When they closed, they didn't pay us for the last 2 weeks, said the money wasn't there, and now my landlady is threatening to evict me because I can't make rent. Evelyn poured her coffee, waiting. I heard you've been making soup for the sick families. I heard you and Caleb have been helping people. Claire's voice cracked. I don't have anyone else to ask. Is there any work you need done? Anything at all? I'm a good baker. I work hard. I need something. Evelyn looked at this woman, her competitor, her enemy. Except she'd never really been either of those things. She'd just been another person trying to survive. I can't pay much, Evelyn said slowly. Claire's eyes filled with hope. Anything would help. And I don't need a baker. I need someone who can make deliveries, keep the books, help with the soup operation we've got running. I can do that. I can do all of that. Evelyn glanced at Caleb, who was watching from the table. He nodded slightly. All right, Evelyn said. You can start today. $6 a week to begin with, more if business picks up. Claire nearly collapsed with relief. Thank you so much. Don't thank me yet. You're going to earn every penny. By mid-February, Claire had become indispensable. She was organized where Evelyn was chaotic, detail-oriented where Evelyn was impulsive. She set up a proper accounting system, organized the soup deliveries into efficient routes, and even convinced some of the recovering families to pay what they could, when they could. The other two bakers from the Quality Bakery approached Evelyn next. Brothers named Daniel and Marcus, both young and scared and desperate for work. I can't hire you both, Evelyn said. We'll split one salary, Daniel said quickly. We'll work together, whatever you need. Why not go somewhere else? Silver City, Denver? Marcus shook his head. Our ma is here. She's sick. We can't leave. Evelyn understood that. Family roots ran deep, even when the soil was rocky. All right? But you're not baking. I do the baking. You two are going to help Caleb expand the meat operation. Hunting, trapping, processing. Think you can handle that? They could. By March, the bakery had transformed into something Evelyn barely recognized. It was still her mother's recipes, still the same old oven and worn floorboards. But now there were 5 people working instead of 1. There were regular deliveries to the mining camps. There was a whole section devoted to prepared foods, soups, stews, meat pies that people could buy frozen and heat at home. It was bigger, messier, louder. It was alive. The town noticed. People started calling it Harper's Kitchen instead of just the bakery. They came not just for bread, but for community, for the sense that someone was looking out for them. Victor Hale noticed too. He returned to Ridgeline in late March, when the snow was finally starting to melt and the first hints of spring were greening the valley. He walked into the bakery during the lunch rush, his expensive suit looking out of place among the working men and women crowding the counter. Evelyn saw him and felt her jaw tighten. She finished serving Mrs. Chen, then crossed her arms and waited. Miss Harper, Victor said, quite an operation you've built here. What do you want, Victor? To talk, privately, if possible. Evelyn gestured to the table in the corner. They sat, and Victor folded his hands on the table like he was conducting a business meeting. I'll be direct, he said. The Quality Bakery is finished. The building is going up for sale. My investors want to recoup what they can and move on to more profitable ventures. I'm sorry to hear that, Evelyn said, and meant it. Victor's eyebrows rose. Are you? I tried to destroy you. You tried, but people aren't that easy to destroy, not when they're fighting for something real. He was quiet for a moment, studying her. You've changed. When I first met you, you were barely holding on. Now look at you, running a business that feeds half the town, employing people, making a real difference. Is there a point to this? The point is that I underestimated you. I saw a dowdy baker in a failing business and assumed you were finished. I didn't see what you actually were. And what's that? Necessary. Victor pulled a paper from his jacket. I want to sell you the Quality Bakery building, below market value. You can expand your operation, have proper storage, maybe even open a restaurant if you want. Evelyn stared at him. You want to sell it to me? Yes. The building you bought specifically to run me out of business? Yes. Why would you do that? Victor sighed. Because I'm tired of fighting losing battles. Because my investors don't care what happens to Ridgeline as long as they get their money back. Because, and this is going to sound insane, I actually respect what you've done here. You stood your ground when most people would have folded. That's worth something. Evelyn looked at the paper, at the number written there. It was far less than the building was worth, but still more than she had. I can't afford this. You could if you took out a loan. The bank would approve it. You've proven you're a good risk. Or I could stay right here and not take on debt. You could. Victor slid the paper across the table. But you'd be limiting yourself. This building, your mother's building, it served you well. But it's small. You've outgrown it. If you really want to build something that lasts, you need room to grow. Evelyn picked up the paper, reading the terms. It was a fair offer, maybe even generous, but it was also a trap of a different kind. debt, expansion, the risk of growing too big too fast. "I need to think about it," she said. "Take your time. The offer stands for 2 weeks." After he left, Evelyn sat at the table staring at the contract. Caleb slid into the seat across from her. "Heard most of that," he said. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking this is exactly what my mother would have told me to avoid. She always said debt was a chain around your neck." She wasn't wrong. But she also lived small, careful, and she died with barely enough money to bury her. Evelyn looked up at him. What if careful isn't enough? What if playing it safe just means dying slow instead of fast? Caleb reached across the table and took her hand. "This is your decision, Evelyn. Whatever you choose, I'm with you. But I think you should ask yourself what you're really afraid of. Failing, losing everything. You've already lost everything once and came back from it. So what are you really afraid of?" Evelyn thought about it, really thought about it. "I'm afraid of becoming like Victor, of caring more about the business than the people, of losing what makes this place special in the pursuit of making it bigger." "Then don't do that. It's not that simple." "It is, though." Caleb squeezed her hand. "You decide what matters. You set the rules. If you expand, you do it your way, on your terms. You don't have to become Victor just because you grow. You just have to stay yourself." That night, Evelyn called a meeting with her small crew. Claire, Daniel, Marcus, and Caleb gathered around the table after closing. "I've been offered the Quality Bakery building," Evelyn said without preamble. "Victor Hale wants to sell it to me below market value. If I buy it, we'd have room to expand, proper storage, maybe a dining area, space to grow the prepared foods operation." Claire's eyes lit up. "That's incredible, but it means taking on debt. It means risk. And I need to know, if I do this, if I take this leap, are you all in? Because I can't do it alone." "What would it mean for us?" Daniel asked. "More work, more responsibility, but also more opportunity. I'd need Claire to manage the whole operation. I'd need you two to expand the hunting and smoking operation, maybe even bring in someone else to help. I'd need everyone to step up." Marcus leaned forward. "Would we get paid more?" "Eventually, yes. But in the beginning, it might be tight while we're getting established." They looked at each other, having a silent conversation. Finally, Claire spoke. "I'm in. This is the first place that's treated me like I matter. I'll do whatever it takes to help it succeed." Daniel and Marcus nodded. "We're in too." Evelyn looked at Caleb. He smiled. "You know my answer." "All right then." Evelyn took a deep breath. "I'm buying the building." The next 2 months were chaos. The bank approved the loan after reviewing Evelyn's books, which Claire had organized so meticulously that even the banker was impressed. The sale went through in early April. Evelyn signed the papers with shaking hands, officially becoming the owner of 2 buildings and more debt than she'd ever imagined. Then the real work began. They cleaned the Quality Bakery building from top to bottom, scrubbing away the corporate polish and revealing the bones underneath. The modern ovens were sold. Evelyn had no use for them. The space was reorganized into a proper commercial kitchen with storage, a smoking room for Caleb's meat operation, and a small dining area with 6 tables. "It's not fancy," Evelyn said, looking around the transformed space. "It's perfect," Claire replied. "It's us." They opened the expanded operation on a rainy Saturday in May. Evelyn was terrified nobody would come, that they'd overreached, that the debt would bury them. By noon, every table was full, and there was a line out the door. People came for the food, but they stayed for the atmosphere. The dining area became a gathering place, somewhere people could sit and talk over coffee and fresh bread. The mining families came because the prices were fair. The ranchers came because the meat was good. The old-timers came because it felt like home. Business tripled in the first month. "We're going to make it," Claire said one evening, reviewing the books. "Evelyn, we're actually going to make it." Evelyn looked around the kitchen, at Claire working the numbers, at Daniel and Marcus hauling in fresh game, at Caleb managing the smoker with the same quiet competence he brought to everything. This was her family now, not by blood, but by choice. "Yeah," she said softly. "We are." But success brought new challenges. With more business came more pressure. They needed more supplies, more staff, more everything. Evelyn found herself working 16-hour days managing books and inventory and personnel issues. The baking, the thing she actually loved, got pushed to the margins. One night in June, she snapped at Caleb over something trivial. He'd put the flour in the wrong bin, or maybe she just needed someone to yell at. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. I'm tired." "I know." Caleb set down the sack he'd been carrying. "Evelyn, when's the last time you took a day off?" "I can't take a day off. There's too much to do." "There's always too much to do, but you're going to burn out if you keep this up." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're exhausted and stressed, and you're starting to sound like Victor Hale." The words hit like cold water. Evelyn stared at him. "What? You heard me. You're so focused on making this business succeed that you're forgetting why you built it in the first place. It wasn't about money or expansion or proving something to the town. It was about preserving what your mother created, about community, about connection." "I haven't forgotten that." "Haven't you? When's the last time you actually talked to a customer? Not took their order, talked to them. When's the last time you just baked something because you wanted to, not because it was on the production schedule?" Evelyn opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. He was right. She'd been so busy managing the business that she'd stopped being part of it. "I don't know how to do both," she admitted. "How to run this operation and still be me. You delegate. You trust the people you hired. You let Claire handle the books, and Daniel and Marcus handle the meat, and you focus on the baking." Caleb stepped closer. "And you remember that this is supposed to be a life, not just a business." "What if I fail?" "Then you fail. But at least you'll fail as yourself, not as some watered-down version trying to be what you think a successful business owner should be." Evelyn felt tears prickling her eyes. "How do you always know what to say?" "I don't. I just pay attention." He pulled her into his arms. "You're allowed to be human, Evelyn. You're allowed to be tired and scared and imperfect. You don't have to be strong every second of every day." She buried her face in his shoulder and let herself cry, for the first time in months, maybe years. All the stress and fear and exhaustion came pouring out. Caleb just held her, solid and warm, until she had nothing left. "I love you," she said into his shirt. "I love you too. Now can we please go to bed before you collapse?" The next morning, Evelyn called another meeting. "I'm making some changes," she announced. "Claire, you're officially the general manager. Everything operational goes through you. Daniel, Marcus, you're in charge of the whole meat and game operation. Hire help if you need it, expand if you see opportunities. I trust your judgment." "What are you going to do?" Claire asked. "I'm going back to baking. That's what I'm good at. That's what I love. The rest of you can handle the business side." They stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "You're giving up control?" Daniel said slowly. "I'm giving up the illusion of control. I never had it anyway. I was just exhausting myself pretending I did." Evelyn looked at each of them. "I hired you because you're good at what you do, so do it. I'll bake, you'll run the operations, and together we'll make this work." It was terrifying. It was liberating. It was exactly what she needed. Over the next few weeks, Evelyn rediscovered why she'd fallen in love with baking in the first place. She experimented with new recipes, brought back old ones she'd abandoned, spent hours perfecting techniques. She started teaching classes on Saturday mornings, showing people how to make their own bread at home. The business didn't collapse without her constant oversight. If anything, it ran better. Claire was a natural manager, organized and fair. Daniel and Marcus expanded the meat operation into 3 mining camps, building relationships and steady income. The dining area stayed full from morning to night. And Evelyn was happy. One evening in late July, she and Caleb walked up into the foothills to watch the sunset. The valley spread out below them, ridgeline small and peaceful in the fading light. "Do you ever miss it?" Evelyn asked. "The solitude, living up in the mountains alone." Caleb was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes, but not enough to go back." "Why not?" "Because I've got something better now. Someone to come home to. A purpose that matters." He looked at her. "I spent 15 years hiding from the world because I thought I was broken. Then you showed me I wasn't. You showed me that broken things can still be useful, still be loved." Evelyn took his hand. "We're both broken, I think, just in different ways. Maybe that's why we fit." He pulled something from his pocket, a small carved box worn smooth by handling. "I made this for you, Up at the cabin before everything changed. Evelyn opened it carefully. Inside was a ring, simple, carved from wood, polished until it gleamed. "It's not much," Caleb said, suddenly nervous. "Not gold or silver or anything fancy. Just wood from the pines up north. But I wanted, if you wanted." He stopped, frustrated with his own inability to express what he meant. Evelyn saved him. "Yes." "Yes?" "Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I want to spend my life with you. Yes to all of it." Caleb's expression transformed. Relief and joy and something that looked almost like disbelief. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." She slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "When?" "Whenever you want." "Next month, small ceremony. Just the people who matter." "The people who matter," Caleb repeated, pulling her close. "I like that." They were married in August, on a clear day when the mountains looked close enough to touch. The ceremony was held in the bakery because that's where their story had really begun. Claire stood as Evelyn's witness, Samuel as Caleb's. 20 people crammed into the small space, and it felt exactly right. Evelyn wore a simple dress Mrs. Chen had made, cream-colored with tiny buttons down the back. Caleb wore his cleanest shirt and looked terrified. Reverend Michaels kept the ceremony short, which everyone appreciated. When they kissed, the small crowd cheered. Afterward, there was bread and soup and roasted meat, and people stayed until the lamps burned low, telling stories and laughing. It wasn't fancy or elaborate or anything like what Evelyn had imagined a wedding might be when she was young. It was better. That night, lying in bed with Caleb's arm around her and moonlight streaming through the window, Evelyn thought about how far she'd come. A year ago, she'd been alone and desperate, about to sign away everything that mattered. Now she had a husband, a business that was thriving, a family she'd chosen. She'd fought for this, every inch of it, and she'd won. The thing about winning, Evelyn discovered, is that it doesn't feel the way you think it will. She'd imagined some moment of triumph, some clear line between struggle and success. Instead, it was just mornings that got a little easier, debts that slowly shrank, a rhythm that felt less like survival and more like living. Fall came to the mountains in a wash of gold and red. The aspens turned and the air got that sharp edge that meant winter was coming. Harper's Kitchen, both locations now, hummed with steady business. The original bakery handled retail and the small dining area. The expanded building housed production, storage, and Caleb's growing meat operation. Evelyn was kneading dough one September morning when Claire came in with the books. Her expression troubled. "We need to talk about the Henderson account," Claire said, setting the ledger on the counter. "What about it?" "They haven't paid in 3 months. They keep saying next week, but it's adding up. They owe us $47. Evelyn's hands stilled in the dough. The Hendersons. Mr. Henderson worked at the stamp mill. Mrs. Henderson taught at the school. 4 kids, the youngest just learning to walk. She'd seen them at the church social last week, thin and worn-looking. How much do they usually order? Bread twice a week, sometimes soup. Not much, but consistent. "Cut them off," Evelyn said quietly. Claire blinked. "What?" "Cut them off. No more credit. If they can't pay what they owe, we can't keep extending." Evelyn went back to kneading, her movements rougher than necessary. "It's not personal, it's business. Evelyn, those kids, I know about the kids. I also know we're not a charity. We have our own debts to pay." Claire closed the ledger slowly. "All right, I'll handle it." After she left, Evelyn stood alone in the kitchen, feeling like she'd swallowed something sharp. This was the right decision, the business decision. You couldn't survive if people didn't pay. But it still felt wrong. That evening, she was closing up when Mr. Henderson appeared at the door. He was a slight man, weathered and quiet, his hat clutched in both hands. Mrs. Stone, I mean. Could I have a word?" Evelyn let him in, her stomach nodding. "Claire spoke to you," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am. And I understand. We owe money. We haven't paid. You can't just keep giving us credit forever." He twisted his hat. "But I wanted to explain. My wife, she's expecting again, due in January, and she's been having complications, needs bed rest. Doc bills have been piling up, and with her not working," he stopped, his voice cracking. "I'm not asking for more credit. I just wanted you to know we're not deadbeats. We're just drowning." Evelyn looked at this man. proud enough to explain but broken enough to do it, and saw herself a year ago. Desperate and alone, fighting to keep her head above water while the whole world told her to just let go. "How much can you pay right now?" she asked. Henderson pulled a small leather purse from his pocket and counted out coins. $3.40. It's all I have until payday Friday. Evelyn did the math in her head. At this rate, it would take him over 3 months to clear the debt, assuming he could keep making payments and didn't add to it. "Keep your money," she said. "Ma'am? Keep it. Buy your wife something she needs, medicine, food, whatever." Evelyn pulled the ledger toward her and crossed out the Henderson account balance. "Your debt is cleared." Henderson stared at her. You can't just, I can do whatever I want, it's my business." She looked at him directly. "But I need you to promise me something. When you're back on your feet, when your wife is recovered and working again, you help someone else. Someone who's drowning the way you are now. Can you do that?" Henderson's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, ma'am. I swear it." After he left, Evelyn sat at the counter and put her head in her hands. Caleb found her there 20 minutes later. "What happened?" he asked, sitting beside her. She told him. All of it. The debt, the decision to cut them off, the reversal. "Claire's going to think I'm crazy," Evelyn said. "We can't run a business if I forgive every debt." "No," Caleb agreed. "But you can't run a business that matters if you forget why you started it." "We have our own debts, Caleb, our own struggles." "We do, and we're making it work. The Hendersons weren't taking advantage. They were just in a hard spot. You remember what that feels like." Evelyn did remember. She remembered the weight of debt, the shame of not being able to pay, the desperate hope that someone might show mercy. "I'm going to go broke doing this," she said. "Maybe. Or maybe you'll build something worth more than money." She looked at him, this man who'd given her $800 without expecting anything in return. "You really believe that? I married you, didn't I?" The next morning, Evelyn called a staff meeting. Claire, Daniel, Marcus, and 2 new hires, a young woman named Sarah, who helped with serving, and an older man named Jim, who'd taken over some of the hunting duties. "I need to tell you something about how we're going to run this business," Evelyn said. "Last night I forgave a debt. $47 we were owed, just wiped it clean. Claire's probably told you already." Claire shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. "I'm going to do it again," Evelyn continued. "When people are genuinely struggling, when they're in hard spots through no fault of their own, I'm going to help them. Which means sometimes we're going to operate at a loss. Sometimes we're going to give away product. Sometimes we're going to make decisions that don't make sense on paper." "Evelyn?" Claire started, but Evelyn held up a hand. "Let me finish. I know this sounds crazy. I know businesses don't work this way, but I'm not building just a business. I'm building a community institution, something that matters beyond profit. And I need to know if you're all comfortable with that. Because if you're not, if you need the certainty of a normal operation, I'll understand if you want to find other work." Silence. Then Sarah spoke up. "My mother raised 6 kids alone after my father died in the mines. There were times we would have starved if people hadn't helped us." "I'm in." Jim nodded. "I've been on both sides of charity. I know what it means. Count me in." Daniel and Marcus exchanged glances. "We're family," Marcus said simply. "Family sticks together even when it doesn't make sense." Everyone looked at Claire. She was staring at the ledger in her hands, her expression unreadable. "Claire," Evelyn said gently, "I became a baker because I loved making things with my hands," Claire said slowly. "But somewhere along the way, I forgot that business is about people, not just numbers. You just reminded me." She looked up, eyes clear. "I'm in, but I'm going to make damn sure we stay solvent while we're being charitable. Someone has to balance your bleeding heart with actual math." Evelyn laughed, relief flooding through her. "Deal." They implemented what Claire called the compassion protocol. Every month, they set aside a portion of profits specifically for debt. Forgiveness, free meals for families in crisis, and emergency food supplies. Claire tracked it meticulously, making sure it didn't exceed what they could afford. It wasn't much, maybe $50 a month, but it was something. Word spread. People started coming to Harper's Kitchen not just because the food was good, but because it felt like a place that cared. The dining room became a gathering spot for miners between shifts, for mothers with small children who needed a place to rest, for old-timers who wanted company more than food. Evelyn found herself in conversations she never would have had otherwise. A young widow told her about trying to keep her husband's cobbler business running. A prospector shared his dreams of striking it rich, knowing they'd probably never come true. A traveling preacher talked about the loneliness of his calling. She listened to all of them, learned their stories, carried their griefs and hopes, the way her mother had before her. One October afternoon, Victor Hale walked into the bakery. Evelyn was wiping down tables and didn't see him at first. When she looked up and their eyes met, she felt her whole body tense. "Evelyn," he said, "can we talk?" They sat at a corner table. Victor looked different, less polished, more worn. His suit was still expensive but rumpled, like he'd been traveling hard. "I heard what you've been doing," he said. "The debt forgiveness, the community work. It's impressive." "I'm not doing it to impress anyone." "I know. That's why it's impressive." He folded his hands on the table. "I came to apologize." Evelyn blinked. "What?" "For what I tried to do to you, for thinking I could buy you out or intimidate you into becoming something you're not." Victor's voice was steady but quiet. "I spent my whole career treating businesses like numbers on a spreadsheet. Bought them, sold them, improved them, made money, moved on. Never thought about the people involved." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I lost everything. The investors pulled out of all my projects, said I'd become a liability, that my judgment was compromised. They were right." He looked out the window at the street. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said that day, about becoming someone else just to survive. I realized I'd already done that. I'd become exactly what I needed to be to make money, and somewhere along the way I lost whatever made me human." Evelyn didn't know what to say. This man had tried to destroy her, had nearly succeeded, and now he sat across from her looking broken and lost. "What are you going to do now?" she asked finally. "I don't know. Start over, I guess. Figure out who I am when I'm not playing a role." He stood. "I just wanted you to know I was wrong. About you, about this place, about everything. You built something real, something that matters. I wish I'd understood that before I tried to tear it down." "Victor," Evelyn said as he turned to leave, "there's a bakery in Silver City that's for sale. Small operation, nothing fancy. Owner died and the family wants to unload it cheap. If you're serious about starting over, about doing things differently, maybe that's a place to begin." He looked at her with something like wonder. "After everything I did, you're helping me? I'm giving you information. What you do with it is up to you." She paused. "But yeah, I'm helping, because that's what people do." Victor left without another word, but Evelyn saw something in his expression she'd never seen before. Hope, maybe, or possibility. That winter was hard but manageable. The influenza outbreak had weakened by spring, leaving behind grief and empty spaces, but also a strange sense of resilience. People had seen their neighbors at their worst and helped anyway. That meant something. Harper's Kitchen kept growing. Daniel and Marcus expanded the smoking operation, bringing in elk and deer from the high country. They started selling jerky and smoked sausages as far away as Denver, shipping by rail. Claire developed a mail-order system for people in remote mining camps who couldn't make the trip to town. By the following spring, they'd paid off half the loan on the second building. "At this rate, we'll own both properties free and clear in 3 years, Claire said, reviewing the numbers one evening. "That soon?" Evelyn couldn't quite believe it. "That's soon, assuming we don't have any major disasters." Claire closed the ledger. "You've built something remarkable here, Evelyn. Your mother would be proud." Evelyn felt her throat tighten. "You think so?" "I know so. She built a bakery. You built a legacy." That night, Evelyn lay in bed beside Caleb, listening to him breathe in the darkness. He'd been working hard lately, spending long days in the mountains checking trap lines and scouting new territories. He came home exhausted every night but never complained. "Caleb?" she whispered. Are you happy?" He rolled over to face her. "What kind of question is that?" "A real one. Are you happy? Living in town, working this hard, being tied down to all of this?" Caleb was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I spent 15 years alone in the mountains because I thought that's what I deserved. I thought I was too broken, too damaged, too much of a mess to be around people. Then I met you, and you showed me I was wrong. So yeah, I'm happy. Even when I'm tired, even when things are hard. Because I'm building something with you, and that matters more than being comfortable. What if I hadn't been worth it? What if you'd given up everything for someone who let you down? Then I still would have learned something. But you didn't let me down. You never have. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. Why are you asking this? Because sometimes I worry I'm being selfish, that I've pulled you into my life, into my dream, and maybe you'd be happier if... Stop. Caleb's voice was firm. Evelyn, you didn't pull me into anything. I chose this. I choose it every day. And if you think I'd be happier alone in a cabin eating squirrel meat and talking to myself, you don't know me as well as you think you do. She laughed despite herself. You really ate squirrel? Rabbit mostly, but yeah, sometimes squirrel. He pulled her close. The point is, this is my life too, our life, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. In the morning, Evelyn woke before dawn as she always did. She went downstairs to the bakery and started the ovens, then began the familiar ritual of making bread. Caleb joined her an hour later, moving quietly through the kitchen to start the coffee. This was their rhythm now. The peaceful early hours before the rest of the world woke up, just the two of them working side by side in comfortable silence. I've been thinking, Caleb said, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. About what? About expansion. Not business expansion, something else. He set a mug in front of her. What would you think about taking on apprentices? Teaching people to bake the way your mother taught you? Evelyn paused in her kneading. You mean like a school? Not formal like that, more like passing it on. There are kids in this town who'd benefit from learning a trade, and there are traditions worth preserving. Your family's recipes, the techniques, the stories behind them, they shouldn't die with you. The thought had never occurred to her, but as soon as Caleb said it, Evelyn knew it was right. Her mother had taught her. Her grandmother had taught her mother. That chain of knowledge stretched back generations, and it deserved to continue forward. We'd need space, she said slowly, a proper teaching kitchen. We've got the second building. There's a whole section we're not using yet. And we'd need to figure out how to make it work financially. Can't charge much if we're teaching kids who need it most. So we charge the ones who can afford it and subsidize the ones who can't. Same principle as everything else we do. Evelyn looked at him, this quiet mountain man who saw possibilities she'd never considered. When did you get so smart about business? I live with Claire. It rubs off. He grinned. So what do you think? Want to become a teacher? Yeah, Evelyn said. I think I do. They started small. 2 students, both teenagers who'd lost parents and needed direction. Evelyn taught them in the mornings before the bakery opened, showing them how to feel the dough, how to judge the oven temperature, how to know when something was done not by time, but by instinct. One of the students, a girl named Annie, whose mother had died of influenza, took to it immediately. She had the touch, that indefinable quality that separated good bakers from great ones. The other, a boy named Thomas, was clumsy and frustrated at first, but he kept showing up, kept trying, kept improving. Evelyn saw herself in both of them, the natural talent and the hard-won skill, the passion and the perseverance. You're good at this, Caleb observed one morning, watching Evelyn guide Annie through a difficult braiding technique. It feels right, Evelyn said, like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. By summer, they had 6 apprentices. By fall, 10. Claire organized it into a proper program. 6 months of training, room and board included for those who needed it, placement in bakeries across the territory for those who completed it successfully. We're building a pipeline, Claire explained to a group of visiting merchants from Denver. Training skilled bakers and sending them out into communities that need them. It's good for business. They buy supplies from us, refer customers our way. But more than that, it's good for the territory, skilled labor, economic development, community building. The merchants were impressed. One of them, a woman named Eleanor who owned a chain of hotels, offered to sponsor scholarships for promising students. I like what you're doing here, Eleanor said to Evelyn. It's smart business wrapped in genuine humanity, rare combination. We're just trying to do things right, Evelyn replied. That's exactly what makes it special. Most people are trying to do things profitably. You're trying to do them right. Turns out those aren't mutually exclusive. The apprenticeship program brought unexpected attention. A reporter from the Denver newspaper came to write a story about the frontier bakery training the next generation. The article called Evelyn a pioneer in community-based business education and credited Harper's Kitchen with proving that profit and purpose can coexist. Evelyn hated the attention. She didn't want to be a pioneer or a model or anything other than a baker who happened to teach. But the publicity brought opportunities. More students, more business partnerships, more growth. "This is getting bigger than us," she said to Caleb one night, reading yet another letter from someone who wanted to learn about their apprenticeship model. "Is that bad?" "It's overwhelming. I just wanted to bake bread and help some kids. Now people are talking about franchising, about spreading the model to other towns, about turning this into some kind of movement." Caleb set down the trap he'd been repairing. "So don't do those things. You're in charge, Evelyn. You get to decide what this becomes. What if I make the wrong choice? Then you'll figure it out and adjust. That's what you always do." But the pressure kept building. A businessman from Chicago offered to invest $50,000 in exchange for a controlling interest in Harper's Kitchen. A publisher wanted Evelyn to write a book about her business philosophy. A women's college in Boston invited her to speak about female entrepreneurship. All of it was flattering. All of it was tempting. And all of it felt wrong. "I don't want to be famous," Evelyn told Claire in frustration. "I don't want to write books or give speeches or sell out to investors. I just want to run my bakery." "Then say no," Claire replied simply. "To all of it? To everything that doesn't serve what you're actually trying to do." Claire pulled out the ledger and pointed to the numbers. "Look at this. We're profitable. We're growing at a sustainable rate. We're training new bakers and feeding our community and paying off our debts. Why complicate it? Because people keep saying we could do more. We could, but should we?" Claire closed the ledger. "Evelyn, you've spent the last 2 years building exactly what you want. Don't let other people's vision of success make you doubt that." So Evelyn started saying no. No to the investor from Chicago, no to the book deal, no to the speaking tour. She wrote polite letters explaining that she was focused on her local community and wasn't interested in expansion beyond what served that purpose. Some people were disappointed. Some thought she was foolish to turn down opportunities. But Evelyn felt lighter than she had in months. "I think I finally understand something my mother used to say," she told Caleb one evening. "What's that?" "That success isn't about how much you have. It's about how well what you have serves your purpose." "Your mother was a smart woman." "She was. I wish I'd appreciated that more when she was alive." The second anniversary of their wedding came in August. Caleb wanted to do something special, but Evelyn insisted on keeping it simple. A day off, a hike into the mountains, just the two of them away from the bakery and the business and all the demands. They climbed to a high meadow where wildflowers bloomed in impossible colors, and the air smelled like pine and snow. They ate sandwiches and lay in the grass watching clouds drift past. "Do you ever regret it?" Evelyn asked. "Regret what?" "Coming down from this mountain, getting involved in all of this mess." Caleb rolled onto his side to look at her. "Not once." "Do you regret letting me in?" "Never." "Then why do you keep asking?" Evelyn was quiet for a long time, trying to find the right words. "Because I know I'm not easy. I'm stubborn and difficult, and I work too much, and I'm always worried about something. And I keep thinking that eventually you're going to wake up and realize you married a crazy woman who cares more about bread than about anything else." "You care about bread because bread is how you love people," Caleb said. "I figured that out the first time I watched you work. You put your whole heart into every loaf because you believe it matters. Because you believe feeding people, connecting with people, building community, all of that matters. And you're right. It does. Even when it's exhausting? Especially then, things that matter usually are." They lay there until the sun started to sink toward the peaks, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Then they hiked back down to town, to their life, to the bakery that was still just a bakery, even though it had become so much more. That fall, Annie, the girl who'd shown such natural talent, finished her apprenticeship. Evelyn had hoped she'd stay on at Harper's Kitchen, but Annie had other plans. "There's a mining town called Silverton," Annie said, "about 50 miles east. They don't have a bakery, just a general store that sells stale bread shipped in from who knows where. I want to open a place there, small, like yours used to be, serve the miners and their families." Evelyn felt pride and loss in equal measure. "That's a good plan. I'll use your mother's recipes, the ones you taught me. And I'll tell the stories the way you do. Let people know where the bread comes from." Annie hesitated. "I'll pay you for the recipes, of course. It's only fair." "No," Evelyn said. "No, those recipes were given to me. My mother got them from her mother, who got them from hers. They're meant to be passed on, not sold." Evelyn pulled out her mother's old recipe book, the one with generations of notes and adjustments. She carefully copied out several pages and handed them to Annie. "Take these, use them, and when you teach someone else, pass them along the same way." Annie's eyes filled with tears. "I won't let you down. I know you won't. You're going to do great things in Silverton." After Annie left, Evelyn felt the weight of what she'd just done. She'd given away her family's recipes, the recipes Victor Hale had offered thousands of dollars for, without asking for anything in return. Claire would probably think she was crazy. But it felt right. More right than anything had felt in a long time. The pattern repeated with other apprentices. They'd finish their training, then go out into the territory and open their own small operations. Each one carried Harper recipes and Harper techniques and Harper values. Each one became a node in a growing network of bakeries that prioritized community over profit, connection over efficiency. Within 2 years, there were Harper-trained bakers in 15 towns across Colorado and Wyoming. They wrote to Evelyn regularly, sharing their successes and struggles, asking for advice, telling her about the communities they were serving. "You've created a movement," Claire said, reading through the latest batch of letters. "I've created a family," Evelyn corrected. "A family of bakers who give a damn." The original Harper's Kitchen kept evolving. They added a small library in one corner where people could borrow books. They started hosting community meetings in the dining room after hours. They became a gathering place for everything from union organizing to wedding planning to grief support groups. "This is what I wanted," Evelyn said to Caleb one evening, watching a group of miners' wives planning a fundraiser for families affected by a recent cave-in. "A place that matters. A place that serves." "You got it," Caleb said. "You built it from nothing. You and your mother and your grandmother. All of you built this." By their 3rd anniversary, Harper's Kitchen had become an institution. Not just a bakery, but a fundamental part of how Ridgeline functioned. When disasters struck, people gathered there. When celebrations happened, they happened there. When someone needed help, that's where they went. Evelyn was no longer fighting to survive. She was living, really living, in a way she'd never thought possible. One evening in late October, she stood in the bakery after closing, looking around at everything they'd built. The old oven still worked, though it had been rebuilt twice. The wooden counter was worn smooth by countless transactions. The recipe cards were yellowed and stained, but still legible. Her mother's bakery, her grandmother's bakery, her great-grandmother's bakery. And now, finally, truly hers. Caleb came down from the apartment carrying a small wooden box. "Found this in your mother's things. Thought you might want to see it." Inside were letters, correspondence between her grandmother and great-grandmother, between her mother and grandmother. Stories about the bakery's early days, about struggles and triumphs, about the choice to build something that mattered more than profit. "They all faced the same things I did," Evelyn said, reading through the brittle pages. "Debt, competition, pressure to change. And they all chose the same thing, to stay true to what they believed." "It's in your blood," Caleb said. "No, it's in my choices. They chose to fight for something real, and I chose to honor that fight." Evelyn closed the box gently. "That's what legacy is. Not what you inherit, but what you choose to preserve." The final letter in the box was from her mother, written shortly before she died. Evelyn had never seen it before. It had been tucked away, probably meant to be found at some future moment. "My dear Evelyn," it read, "if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're trying to decide what to do with this place. I know you think you hate baking. I know you want something else, something bigger. But I hope you'll understand that this bakery isn't about bread. It's about connection. It's about showing up every day and doing something that matters, even when nobody notices. Even when it's hard, especially then. Whatever you decide, know that I'm proud of you. Not for what you accomplish, but for who you are. Stay true to that, and you'll be fine. Love, Mama." Evelyn read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Her mother had known, had seen her resentment and her restlessness, and loved her anyway. Had trusted her to find her way back to what mattered. "She was right," Evelyn said to Caleb. About all of it. What are you thinking? Evelyn wiped her eyes and stood, slipping the letter into her apron pocket. I'm thinking it's time to start writing my own letters, for whoever comes after me, so they'll know why this matters and what we fought for. That winter, Evelyn began writing. Not a business book or a memoir, but letters to the future. To the apprentices who'd one day run their own bakeries. To the families she might have someday. To anyone who'd stand in this kitchen and wonder if the fight was worth it. She wrote about Victor Hale and the contract she'd torn up. About Caleb appearing with $800 and no expectation of return. About the influenza epidemic and the Henderson debt and the choice to build something larger than profit. She wrote about her mother and grandmother and the chain of women who'd chosen community over comfort. This is for them, she told Caleb, showing him the growing stack of pages, so they'll know they're not alone in the fight. They won't be, Caleb said, because you'll have shown them the way. The letters became a ritual. Every week, Evelyn would write a few more pages, adding stories and lessons and hard-won wisdom. Claire typed them up and organized them into a binder that lived on the shelf next to the recipe book. Future Baker's Guide, Claire called it. Everything you need to know about running a bakery that actually matters. The guide grew to over 100 pages. Stories, recipes, financial advice, philosophical reflections. It became required reading for apprentices. A roadmap for anyone trying to build something real in a world that constantly pushed for easier, cheaper, more profitable. Evelyn's 35th birthday came and went. She was no longer the same woman who'd sat across from Victor Hale, desperate and alone. She'd become someone stronger, wiser, more certain of her purpose. The lines around her eyes had deepened. Her hands were more calloused. Her hair had started going gray at the temples. She'd never been more beautiful. You're staring, she said to Caleb one morning, catching him watching her knead dough. Can't help it. You're impressive when you work. I'm elbow deep in flour. I'm a mess. You're perfect. Evelyn rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. You have to say that. You married me. I say it because it's true. Caleb crossed the kitchen and kissed the top of her head. You built something amazing, Evelyn. Against every odd, in spite of everyone who said you couldn't. You built something that's going to outlast both of us. We built it, she corrected. You and me and Claire and everyone else who believed. Fine. We built it. But you led the way. That spring, they got word that Victor Hale had successfully turned around the bakery in Silver City. It was small but profitable, focused on quality and community rather than expansion. He'd written to thank Evelyn for the tip and to tell her he'd finally figured out what actually mattered. Good for him, Caleb said when Evelyn shared the letter. You're not angry? He tried to destroy us. He failed, and he learned something from it. That's more than most people manage. Evelyn thought about that, about grace and forgiveness and the way people could change if given the chance. Her mother would have approved of that thinking. By their 5th anniversary, Harper's Kitchen had trained and placed 43 bakers across the Western Territories. The bakery itself was profitable enough that they'd paid off both buildings and were operating debt-free for the first time in its history. The apprenticeship program had waiting lists. The dining room was always full. We should celebrate, Claire said. 5 years of marriage, 5 years of expansion, 5 years of proving everyone wrong. That deserves something special. They threw a party, not a fancy affair, but a real frontier celebration with food and music, and half the town crammed into the dining room. People told stories about the old days, about how far they'd come, about what Harper's Kitchen meant to the community. Evelyn stood at the edge of the room, watching it all, feeling overwhelmed in the best possible way. Speech, someone called. Speech from Evelyn. The room quieted. Everyone turned to look at her. Evelyn felt her face flush, but Caleb gave her a gentle push forward. I'm not good at speeches, she started. You're better than you think, someone shouted, and everyone laughed. Evelyn took a breath. 5 years ago, I was about to give up. I was sitting at a table with a man who'd offered me money and security in exchange for becoming someone else. And I almost took it, almost signed away everything my family had built because I was tired and scared and alone. The room was silent now, everyone listening. Then Caleb walked through that door and gave me something I'd never had before, a choice. Not just money, but the freedom to choose who I wanted to be without having to compromise or change or apologize. She found Caleb in the crowd and held his gaze. That gift changed everything. It showed me that I didn't have to be what other people thought I should be. I could just be myself, and that could be enough. She looked around the room at all these faces, Claire and Daniel and Marcus and Annie and Thomas and all the others who'd become family. So here's what I've learned. Success isn't about being perfect or polished or fitting some mold someone else created. It's about showing up as yourself, doing work that matters, and refusing to apologize for what you believe. It's about building something real, especially when the whole world tells you to build something profitable instead. Her voice grew stronger. My mother taught me to bake bread, but she taught me something more important too. She taught me that the work we do isn't just about survival. It's about connection, about showing up for people even when it's hard, about choosing community over convenience and purpose over profit. Evelyn felt tears threatening but pushed through. I'm not special, I'm just stubborn and lucky enough to have found people who believed in the same things I did, who were willing to fight for something real. That's what this place is. A testament to the idea that you don't have to sell your soul to survive. You can stay true to yourself and still build something that lasts. The room erupted in applause. People were crying, laughing, raising glasses in toast. Evelyn felt Caleb's arm around her waist, anchoring her. That was perfect, he whispered. I meant every word. I know. Later, after most people had left and just the core group remained, they sat around a table sharing the last of the wine. The conversation drifted to the future, to plans and possibilities. I want to expand the apprenticeship program, Claire said. Bring in more students, maybe develop a more formal curriculum. I want to explore new hunting territories, Daniel added. Push further into the high country, see what we can find. I want to open a restaurant, Sarah said shyly. Something small but nice, using all the techniques I've learned here. They went around the table, each person sharing their dreams. When it came to Evelyn, she was quiet for a moment, thinking. I want to keep doing exactly what we're doing, she said finally. Not bigger, not different, just this. Just showing up every day and making bread and teaching people and building community. That's enough for me. That's more than enough, Caleb said. That's everything. The years that followed proved him right. Harper's Kitchen didn't become a franchise or a movement or anything grander than what it was. A bakery that cared about people more than profit, that trained new generations of bakers who carried those values forward, that served as the heart of a small mountain town that needed one. Evelyn kept baking, kept teaching, kept writing letters to the future. She and Caleb never had children of their own, but they had dozens of apprentices who became like family. Some stayed in Ridgeline, some spread out across the territories. All of them carried forward the lessons they'd learned. On Evelyn's 40th birthday, the apprentices threw her a surprise party. They came from all over, from Silverton and Denver, and places she'd never heard of. Each one brought bread they'd made using her mother's recipes, and they told stories about what Harper's Kitchen had meant to them. You saved my life, Annie said simply. I was lost and angry and heading nowhere good. You gave me purpose. You taught me that business could have a soul, said a young man named Peter, who now ran a bakery in Wyoming, that I didn't have to choose between making a living and making a difference. One by one, they spoke about lessons learned and lives changed and communities built, about the ripple effects of one stubborn woman who refused to compromise. Evelyn sat listening to it all, overwhelmed by the realization of what she'd actually accomplished. She hadn't just built a bakery. She'd built a philosophy, a way of being in the world that prioritized humanity over efficiency, connection over profit, purpose over scale. It wasn't the success she'd imagined as a young woman. It was better. Because it was real. Because it mattered. Because it would outlast her. That night, lying in bed beside Caleb, Evelyn thought about the journey that had brought her here. From desperate and alone to surrounded by family. From nearly giving up to leading the way. From hating her inheritance to honoring it. Are you happy? Caleb asked, echoing the question she'd asked him years before. More than I ever thought possible, Evelyn said honestly. Are you? Every single day. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, secure in the knowledge that they'd built something that mattered. Not perfect, not polished, but real. Human. Lasting. The wooden sign Caleb had carved still hung above the bakery door. Harper's. Established 1868. Below it, Evelyn had added a smaller sign with a quote she'd found in one of her grandmother's letters. We don't just make bread, we make home. That's what it was in the end. Not a business or an institution or a legacy, Though it was all those things too. It was home for Evelyn and Caleb, for the apprentices who passed through, for the community that gathered there, for anyone who needed a place to belong. And that, Evelyn had learned, was the only success that actually mattered. Not how much you built, or how big you grew, or how many people knew your name, but whether you created a space where people felt seen and valued and cared for, whether you showed up, day after day, doing work that served something larger than yourself, whether you stayed true to who you were, even when the whole world told you to be someone else. That was the lesson. That was the legacy. That was what she'd learned from her mother and grandmother and would pass on to everyone who came after. Stay true. Build real. Choose people over profit, always. The rest would follow.